The incessant building collapses in Nigeria have led to a lot of loss of lives and jobs and eroded confidence in the real estate industry. The Building Collapse Prevention Guild recorded at least 62 catastrophes in 2022, causing 84 deaths and injuring 113 persons. Lagos had 20 cases, while Kano and Anambra recorded 5 building collapse incidents each, and Delta and Jigawa 4 each. Also, 135 cases were reported between 2007 and 2013. The two-story building that collapsed in Garki area of Abuja has ended with 37 people injured and 2 confirmed dead in the tragedy that occurred following heavy downpour rain on Thursday morning. Trust TV's Shafiu Suleiman speaks to some of the survivors and eyewitnesses amidst concerns over the integrity of adjoining buildings showing signs of dilapidation. Take a look.
Excavators searching through the rubbles of the two-story building that collapsed midnight as a result of heavy downpour here on Lagos Street in Garki, Abuja, Nigeria's capital. The rescuers have been intensifying efforts to search through the rubbles if they can find any survivor.
Rescue operators making last-minute efforts to find any possible survivors of the building collapse, which is becoming one too many in the nation's capital. Eyewitness narrates his experience seeing the building go down.
We started hearing shout that there are some people stuck into the building, and we tried to rescue some. We rescued three, and 1 died among the girls I rescued from my own behind of the house.
This lady is one of the occupants of the building who survived death by the whiskers.
I thought everything was a joke from beginning, not knowing it's real. You know, I lost everything. I did not even pick anything, even one industrial machine. Even if it's my weaving machine, let me just take one, then the rest, nothing.
In the usual manner of doing things at the 11th hour, the authority concerned with certifying buildings in the city is carrying out integrity tests on similar structures to avoid reoccurrence, while the FCT administration takes steps to address the challenge. Shafiu Suleiman, Trust TV News, Abuja.
And in the same vein, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, has ordered the immediate arrest of the owner of the collapsed building when he visited the scene of the incident at Garki village in Abuja. Wike, who gave the order on Thursday, applauded the ongoing rescue efforts, saying that it was unfortunate that they woke up to the very disturbing news of the building collapse. He, however, appealed to the Permanent Secretary to make sure that funds are raised to pay the hospital bills of those who were rescued. The FCT minister said that he will take immediate action to see that the indigenous people of the village were resettled, and then the government has a plan on the area. Take a look.
But one government says take building plan. It is not as if government want to suffer anybody. It's to make sure that everybody is protected. Cities are planned and to forestall this kind of building without ask that we must identify the owner of this. Very, very important. The government, of course, will take over the areas and need to know so that they discourage that. And I want all the stakeholders here to please work with government. It is in the interest of everybody. Member of Ghana that have supported us to rescue not over 32 lives. I will work with the Permanent Secretary to make sure that funds are raised to pay the hospital bills of those who are rescued, so that we don't want to hear any other thing that they are, and that should be done immediately.
A really sad situation there. Now, joining us in the studio is a builder Adetunji Adeniro. He is a registrar, secretary to the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, the Carbon, and a fellow of the Nigerian Institute and a registrar builder, joining us to talk about these issues. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Adetunji.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course.
So, at the top of my head, what comes to mind? I mean, we've seen clips of the search and rescue operations. We've also seen the minister, talk tough about arresting, the landlord of the building, as well as paying the hospital bills of victims. But what comes to my mind is who shares in the blame, the naming and the shaming? Because I believe that while the FCT has, a master plan, there also expectedly should be a building code and building regulation that these builders or these landlords are supposed to adhere to. So in this situation, who takes the blame and where did we get it wrong?
Thank you very much. Now it's unfortunate that we have to talk about blame and getting it wrong after lives have been lost and after there's been a waste of public resources, if you like, because ultimately the economy pays every time there's a building collapse and there's loss of lives. Now, so how did we get it wrong? This building that collapsed did not collapse during construction. So there are buildings that collapse during construction when the life load for which they are designed have not even been put on them. This building collapsed in use. I gather it's probably about 30 years old or so. So it's not a recently built structure. However, there must have been signs of failure over time that were ignored because it wasn't like there was an earthquake or something that changed dramatically. So there must have been signs of failure that were ignored over time by people living in there, by the regulatory authorities, by the people who should be watching out for the public. Those signs were not taken seriously, and over time, it's like you're supporting something, and with time, you hold something in your arms. With time, the weight begins to make your hands go weak, and that's probably the kind of thing that happened with that structure. So it's a case of a structure in use. There was need to keep checking and ensuring that it was fit for purpose. But there obviously was a gap there. Also, the people living in the structure, they would have seen signs. But you know how we kind of do things in this part of the world where you're hoping against hope, like let's just hope nothing goes wrong. But I do think definitely there were telltale signs in the building that could have been picked up and addressed appropriatly.
Mr. Adeniro, talking about these old buildings, it goes way back. And we saw a situation that happened in Zaria where, an old mosque also collapsed on people. And this building that we're talking about in Abuja also is an old building. I mean, some buildings in Abuja, it's since the time of Shagari, about the 1970s, a long time ago. So at what point, can someone actually know when to renovate or even replace the building in general? At what point? Is there anybody, any person that could actually say, okay, this is the time that a building is standing and it needs to go down or it needs to be renovated in order to avoid these circumstances?
Right, so the thing to say is that buildings have a lifespan, like with every endeavor of the human. Buildings have a lifespan. However, again, in these parts of the world, there are buildings in the older cities that have done over 100 years, in Lagos, in Kano. So it's not first and foremost a function of how old the building is, but how well built it was when it was originally built. Buildings are built to last centuries. There are buildings outside the country where the buildings, and you hear it's been there for hundreds of years. So it's not first and foremost how long ago it was constructed, but how well it was constructed at the time it was constructed. Science has also helped to provide facilities to be able to tell the strength of a building while in use. Now, so there is non-destructive tests that can be done on buildings to ascertain the structural stability or the strength of the structural elements. So that's something that needs to happen in the older buildings as we begin to see a pattern of failure where older buildings are giving way. So, and that kind of test, the way the country is, particularly in the FCT, and in every part of the country really, it's government that does that test to ascertain the strength or the livability of a building. They do the test. That happens all over the place in Lagos and the old areas. And I think it's also a conversation going on in the FCT now that those tests need to be done so that the strengths of buildings can be ascertained, and then those that are considered unfit would then be brought down if they have to be brought down.
All right, so Mr. Adeniran, can you talk to us about safety precautions, you know, to ensure that in the longest run, while these buildings, like you said, this one was probably constructed around 30 years ago, I know that expectedly the government is supposed to, you know, through its regulatory bodies, carry out, you know, routine checks on these buildings to ensure that they pass, you know, these structural integrity tests. So can you walk us through some, you know, of these processes?
Now, so interestingly, there's an insurance act in this country, which indeed requires that all public buildings and buildings at a certain level should be insured when in use. One, while under construction. Secondly, when in use. If this act was given effect, it would be almost impossible for an undertaker to insure the risks in a building that is structurally unstable. So it's more like a systemic thing where the insurance industry has to do its part, the professionals in the built environment have to do their part. So that's one way it could go to help achieve this. The other thing to say is that the regulatory bodies in Abuja, the Development Control Department, I think that conversation is a top thing now, that the older buildings, especially in those areas that probably predate actual regulation of the process, there are concerns, of course, that the building that came down yesterday probably did not have an approval, probably was put up without going through the regulatory process. So such buildings need to be looked at now and reviewed in terms of the state of health of those buildings. Where capacity begins to fail the regulatory authorities, that's where the private sector then comes in to provide capacity, additional capacity for the regulatory bodies to be able to do these investigations.
So, Mr. Adeniran, why does it seem as if it is often when unfortunate situations like this happen that the government and the public is awakened to their responsibilities?
Isn't that a societal problem that we have?
So how do we begin to change this mindset?
Now, so first thing is that it transcends the built environment. It's almost a disposition of the average Nigerian to any situation and every situation. As long as I'm not yet affected, I'm happy to close my eyes, turn a blind eye while things go wrong. We begin to change this when the average Nigerian begins to take life seriously. You know, it's been said that development is human-centered, and until value is placed on the human life, you can only go so far. Now, so the average Nigerian must consider their own lives valuable, consider the lives of others valuable. So if I were a landlord and I had a building and I considered the lives of everyone valuable, I won't put people in a building where there's a risk of failure. You know, if I also was living as a tenant in a building and I see cracks and see things developing in such a building, I would also raise an alarm and be able to, you know, shout out before something goes wrong. And I just think that it's a government thing, it's a private sector thing, it's the individuals being awakened to their responsibility kind of thing, just putting value on their lives and on everything that we have to.
Okay, so you know, during your response, you made mention of a few things that I want you to touch on. So, on an average, would say an average Nigerian is most likely doesn't have all of the information that he should need when it comes, to building in terms of regulations. And we know, because we've seen cases where landlords will just put up these buildings and probably just leave them there till these buildings expire. And unfortunately, expiration would mean collapse in this situation as it is. So what are some of these pointers? I mean, I am latching on the conversation you just responded to. What are some of these pointers that Nigerian consumers, talking about tenants now, potential tenants, should look out for, safety-wise, to ensure that, look, I'm getting at least the best building, or a building in the best shape possible, so as to prevent myself or my family members from becoming casualties of building collapses and unfortunate building accidents such as the ones that we've seen in the previous times?
Right. So there's a professional angle to it, and then there's the individual responsibility angle to it. Knowing the state of a building is like knowing the state of a human being. It takes a doctor who is trained to be able to do it. So there is what is known as building survey, which is going through a building and being able to tell every element in the building, every part of the building is able to do what it's supposed to do. Building surveying is a professional skill that is offered by professionals in the built environment. The builder is able to offer that skill and be able to assess a building and tell that it's fit for use. That's at the professional level. At the individual level, when you go in a building and you see cracks anywhere, it should trigger something in you. You should want to find out why the crack. Is it structural? Not every crack is structural, but you should want to find out why this crack in the building. Cracks show a sign of stress in the building, and the professional can look at it and make an assessment of how dangerous such a crack would be. So if you see something in the building that is not supposed to be in a normal building, you see cracks, you see damp everywhere, you see algae growth, bacterial growth in the building, it should raise concerns for the person who is living in the building. Because if there's moisture movement all over the place, it's going to tamper with things that you don't know they're tampering with. You should just be concerned when your building is not looking the way it should look in terms of cracks, particularly a telltale sign of structural problems. When you see a crack, you should be bothered to want to find out what it's about.
All right, Mr. Adeniran, let's take a look at from your own perspective now as a builder and a member of the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria. A lot of this could actually affect your own job. When people no longer trust builders at some point, thinking, okay, they are not really trustworthy. People might charge you money and still not deliver on the, the quality of the product or the building that you desire. So what are you people doing in your council, in order to make sure you keep on with your reputation, good reputation, and also make sure this whole thing is avoided?
Thank you very much. First thing to say is that not everyone who's on site who holds out to be a builder is actually a builder. A builder is only a builder in Nigeria when their names are contained in the register of the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, and they are licensed to practice as builders. So I should also say that of all the buildings that have collapsed in Nigeria to date, not a single one has been handled by a professional builder who is licensed as a builder in Nigeria. Not one. Sorry?
Is this a cause for worry?
It is a cause for worry because it then means that the public, they're not patronizing the right person who can deliver the service in the way they want it to be delivered. So it's quite worrisome. It's worrisome to us as the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria. And we're making engagements, we're doing advocacy for people to know that if you want to build right, engage a professional builder. Building is a multidisciplinary process. there are thousands of inputs, and I don't think I'm exaggerating if I say that go into putting a building together, from the basic elements to things that are coupled before they come to site and all of that. And there's a professional who is trained to know how to put it all together. That professional is the builder. If you don't engage him, you stand the risk of having a structure that collapses either during construction or somewhere down the line at the end of the day. So Carbon is engaging on advocacy. Carbon is also strengthening its infrastructure such that it becomes possible for anyone who wants to engage a builder to go on the Carbon website, for example, and ascertain that, yeah, this person is licensed to practice. Typically, when you want to person who holds out to be a builder, ask them for their practice license. They should have a license issued by Carbon. The same way you'll go into any pharmacy and you'll see a license issued by Pharmaceutical Council of Nigeria before that pharmacy remains open, or you'll go into a medical facility and you'll see a license issued by the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria for that practice to remain open. When you want somebody who says they can build your house, ask them for their license to practice as builders. If they don't have that license, you're taking a risk by giving your building to them.
Okay, so not a professional, you're not a professional, so let's talk punitive measures. By law, what does the law say about those who flout these building regulations, about those who engage in the practice of building when they're not professionals? I mean, there's supposed to be some punitive measures. For example, look at this. This is the timeline of building collapse in 2023, according to building type, location, date, and the number of casualties. I would say that this is too much. I mean, this is just August. This is the 8th month in the year, and we've recorded 26 deaths in the FCT alone, and over 130 persons, injured. Isn't somebody supposed to pay in terms of either fines or, even worse, go to jail for all of this? Because these are people's lives we're talking about.
Right. Every single death is one death too many.
Exactly.
They shouldn't even happen at all.
Sure.
Now, so two things to say. One is that there is a national building code which the Federal Executive Council passed during the life of President Obasanjo's administration. There has been a lot of advocacy at the National Assembly trying to say, so that it becomes something that is enforceable in the country. As we speak today, that has not seen the light of day. So it's an ongoing engagement, and we're hoping that that happens and it begins to help to deal with things. Now, for the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, the establishing law was a decree issued in 1989 or so. So you can imagine the kind of punitive measures that are contained in such a law. When you have a fine, for example, of 5,000 naira, or you have option of going to jail for 6 months or 1 year or stuff. So the measures are not punitive enough by the act. However, state governments have gone ahead then. I know about Lagos state government particularly, where once there's a fatality on a site, government takes over the land and prosecutes the developer or the owner of the property. So state governments have gone a notch higher to take responsibility in their areas of jurisdiction to say that let's deal with this in a bit more serious manner. However, we still do have the challenge of not having recorded serious judicial pronouncements on the issue of building collapse. We've not quite had somebody go to jail. We've had about cases starting, but we've not gotten to the ends of these cases to have those judicial pronouncements say that you, owner of the property, you engaged the wrong person, and you, wrong person who held out to be a professional, you shouldn't have done this. You killed people, it's manslaughter, it's murder, it's whatever it is. Until such judicial pronouncements happen, people would probably still keep testing. and doing what they want to do, hoping to get away with it.
All right, now let's get your final thoughts for Nigerians who would be purchasing or who would be renting buildings, for the professionals, the building professionals, for property developers, and everybody who is one way or the other engaged or related to the building value chain.
And let me add to that, and also, to Nigerians who Thank you for staying with us. So, Mr. Adeniran, Sagir asked you a question about your last thoughts on the people, stakeholders involved in that, and also, people that tend to just pay less in order to avoid spending more just to get their building done.
Right. So, first, it will be being penny wise and pound foolish, because when you decide to pay less, you then incur higher costs because you use a quack. I've been to a project site where somebody engaged a plumber to manage the process. And then I saw the quantity of reinforcement that was put in the slab, and I called the attention of the person to say, hey, wait a minute, if you engaged a professional, what you have wasted on this reinforcement is more than what you will pay the professional. And you're increasing the dead load on your building and all of that. So the point is, somebody will be penny wise and pound foolish if they engage a quack to handle the building for them. Buildings come down, and it doesn't matter how much you have spent on it. It comes down, and it's a waste of all your resources. I cannot overemphasize the fact of be wise, engage professional builders to manage the building production process. That's the professional trained to handle it. There are different professions in the built environment doing different things. The architects, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, the town planners, the land surveyors, the estate surveyors. Everyone has their areas of core competence. The area of core competence of the professional builder who goes to university for 5 years to learn this production process is to manage the process of putting a building together, translating it from paper to reality, and making it habitable for people to live in. So I should say that engage professionals in doing your building, particularly when it comes to putting the building up. Engage professional builders. It's your best bet.
All right, Mr. Adetunji Adeniran, registered builder and secretary to the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, Coban. I want to thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this
Pleasure
morning.
is mine. Thank you for
I
having me.
hope you would join us again when we come calling, and hopefully it won't be on a sad note such, as this one. Thank you so much.
I'll be delighted. Thank you.
Yes.